Welcome back to another Bali COVID-19 update. This is February 13th, 2022, and my name is Bruce. And what's the weather like today? Let's start with that. It is cloudy, hot, and muggy. The wind speed, 10 kilometers per hour, nothing to speak. I'm inside filming instead of outside, however, because there are so many kids outside. It is so loud out there. And the temperature is 29 degrees Celsius and the humidity 78%. And I'm sure it is going to rain again tonight, as it rains every day. How much longer until the dry season? And so what are the main stories today? Main stories: quarantine hotels in Bali and visa requirements. Why am I doing one on quarantine hotels and the visas? Because I've been getting a lot of emails lately asking about this. So some people are planning on coming here, regardless of the quarantine, regardless of the visa, and regardless of COVID, or at least they want to consider the possibility. So going to do that one because this has been updated just yesterday from the BHA, the Bali Hotels Association website, which is a good place to check if you want to know about things going on here in terms of quarantines and visas and hotels. And the second main story is one that is much dearer to my heart than that, and that is Indonesia in learning crisis, education minister. So finally, somebody is saying, look, education here is in bad shape and we need to fix it. Now, that has been said before, and there have been changes. There was a 2013 curriculum update, which I don't know much about because I wasn't teaching at that point. I was retired, but I do remember a few specifics about it, and I didn't like what I heard. And there's a lot of MotoGP, and I skipped about a half a dozen articles. MotoGP is the hot thing in the press right now. G20, not so much. Haven't seen really anything interesting on G20 over the last few days since the last video. And well, people are hoping that visitors are going to show up on the 16th on Singapore Airlines. And well, this is a keep your fingers crossed, because who can tell what's going to happen. Let's get on to the numbers. Okay, the numbers are not particularly good. 7-day average for new positive cases, 2,059. So going up. And the 7-day average for deaths, 10.6. Remember when we had 0 deaths not that long ago. How about the numbers nationally? Wow, 55,209 and deaths 107. So those numbers have shot up. What about testing? Total number of individuals tested in Indonesia, 321,145 with 17.1% positive rate. The 7-day simple average is 16.05% positivity rate. And what about Bali and testing? Bali tested 63,325 over the last 7 days, and a 7-day positivity rate of 14.01%. And vaccinations? Vaccination numbers are pretty stable. First dose, 3,906,954, 86.5% of the population. Second dose, 3,519,316, 77.9% of the population. Boosters, 396,395, 8.8% of the population. And additional doses yesterday in Bali, 12,497. And what about the new cases in Bali? New cases in Bali yesterday, 2,323. Deaths were up to 14, and active cases now are close to 20,000, 19,032. The numbers do not look good, but it was not unexpected, and the government keeps telling people don't panic. And I don't really see anybody panicking except, well, as talked about in one of the segments below, rich people who are going to the hospital because, well, they tested positive, but they're not really sick, but they went to the hospital anyway. It seems like those people are panicking. I don't know about anybody else. I don't know anybody that's panicking, and I'm not panicking either. Okay, so we're continuing to weather the storm here. Well, literally and figuratively. Okay, let's get started with the main story about quarantine hotels and visa requirements. And the main story is quarantine hotels and quarantine visas. And the main story is visas and quarantine hotels in Bali. And why is this the main story? Because I've been getting emails and questions on Facebook and Instagram of people who want to know about what the visa is, what hotels do it. Can I recommend visa agents? No. Okay, I can't because I haven't used any. Well, I used to have a visa agent years ago, but she is not on the recognized list. This information is from the Bali Hotel Association's site, and the link is down below, and I suggest if you're planning on coming here, you take a look at it. All of what I'm going to talk about now is applicable as of February 11th, but is subject to change, of course. Everything's subject to change here. So we started out with 5 hotels that were approved for people coming into Bali, and that has been changed. The government has approved 28 hotels as part of the bubble hotel quarantine program, first stage of Bali's resumption to opening for all international arrivals. And there are an additional 33 hotels that are in-room only quarantine hotels and resorts. If you follow the link in the description box, you'll see hotels, and they will say bubble hotel and in-room hotel only. Some of those links work and some of those links don't work. And some of the links that do work, go there and they say the quarantine program is there, but they don't list anything about price or about what is included. So you'll have to do some research if you are planning on coming in and using the program. Both the bubble hotels and the in-room only hotels and resorts will be available to travelers to book when entering Bali on international flights that meet the entry requirements. Okay, and let's get the definitions. So, bubble hotels, these resorts are quarantine bubbled, meaning you won't be confined to your room for 5 days and will be allowed access to certain facilities within the bubble area of the resorts. The in-room quarantine hotels mean just that. You're going to be stuck inside your room for 5 days, 4 nights. And what about the visa requirements? So foreign nationals who want to visit Bali for tourism purposes must apply for an e-visa. The e-visa has to be submitted by the guarantor to the Director General of Immigration electronically. You can't apply as an individual. And a list of agents is available on this page. These are agents that have been officially approved by the government for use. Your agent will guide you on what you will need to prepare. A copy of a passport, a photo of yourself, proof of full vaccination. You may be required to show a bank statement in English and proof of travel insurance with a minimum coverage of US $25,000 for coronavirus-related emergencies. And you should contact one of the agents listed here in order to get going, although some hotels will also do this for you. And so if you're planning on coming here and you check the hotel website and see they may arrange the visa for you, that's actually the easiest thing to do. But want to look at prices, because I've heard prices as low as 3 million rupees and as high as 5.5 million rupees for the same thing. So you want to do some shopping around here if you're going to come in on this. Because as I've said before, this is not cheap. And yes, you do have other options. I know people like to say, well, I'm not coming. Okay, so you're not coming. Go somewhere else. There's the Philippines, there's Thailand. A lot of places are opening up. Malaysia's opening up. I'm not sure what's going on with Vietnam right now. A friend of mine in Cambodia said Cambodia is opening up. And so there are other places to go. The government's making its policy to fit its plan. Whatever its plan is, I don't know. But if you do want to come, this is what you have to do right now. Indonesian citizens entering Bali must have a hotel booking with a QR code, and all costs will be their own personal expense, including the PCR test on arrival and during quarantine. So if you're an Indonesian citizen, you want to come to Bali, you got to pay your own way. If you go in through Jakarta or Surabaya or MDC, that's a different story. There, the quarantine and the PCR costs are paid by the government, and these facilities are only available in those 3 places, Surabaya, Jakarta, and Manado. Okay, and so that is what you need and what you do if you're going to come into Bali. Let's go on to the next story, which is about the crisis in education. And let's take a look at the second main story, Indonesia in learning crisis, education minister. It's about time this has been addressed. Indonesia's Minister of Education, Culture, Research and Technology, Nadiem Makarim, said that the crisis has just been made worse by the pandemic situation. And if you've been following this channel or you live in Indonesia, you know schools have been shut down here for most of the last 2 years and recently opened here in Bali only to close down again. When will schools open? We don't know. So let's take a look at what the minister had to say. So according to the minister, Indonesia's PISA score has not improved over the past 10 to 15 years. The PISA score is Program for International Student Assessment, and students are ranked around the world based on how well they do in certain subjects. He said Indonesia lags far behind other members of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD. How far below? Well, Indonesia's reading score was 371 in 2018, far below the OECD members' average of 500. And math score was 379. He said 70% of our students who are age 15 have reading and math skills below the minimum competency. We have to declare a crisis which needs extraordinary solutions. It's about time. And Minister Nadiem said what needs to be said, which is that things have gotten worse because of the pandemic, with schools closed and online learning going on, despite the fact that some people have been putting a spin on this, saying online learning is great, no problems. It's not. There are big problems. And where is some data on this? He has some. He said reduced learning progress of the first and second graders in elementary school is shown in terms of both literacy and numeracy. The minister said prior to the pandemic, the average one-year learning competency of a first grader was 129 points for literacy and 78 points for numeracy. After the pandemic, the scores dropped significantly to 77 for literacy and 34 for numeracy. The reduced scores are equal to 5 and 6 months of learning loss, respectively. And this data came from a sampling of 3,391 elementary school students from 7 Regency cities in 4 provinces in January 2020 and April 2021. And my guess is that it's actually even worse than this. And the minister noted that the small sample means that it's likely that there are more areas suffering greater impact from learning loss, particularly remote towns and villages. And yet, we're open for tourism, open for business, and schools are closed again. The rationale behind closing the schools is that kids are going to give each other coronavirus in schools, where there have been procedures set up a long time ago that could be followed, but instead kids are out playing, wandering around the streets, nobody is wearing a mask, and they're not spreading the virus to each other that way. That doesn't make sense to me. So what does Nadiem suggest? Well, that's the next story. Education Minister Nadiem Makarim launches Merdeka Belajar curriculum. So on Friday, in a virtual press conference, he officially launched Merdeka Belajar. Merdeka Belajar is a new curriculum, a follow-up to the development and implementation of the emergency curriculum launched in response to COVID-19 pandemic. The emergency curriculum is a watered-down version of the 2013 curriculum. This new program is a follow-up to the government's attempts to improve the 2013 curriculum. However, the minister said he is not going to entirely revise or remodel the program. He said, we're following the philosophy of independence in learning, and we'll offer 3 options to schools, and their choice will depend on their preparations. So schools will be given the option of these 3 approaches for 2022-2023 school year, which will be coming up in July. The first option is to use the 2013 curriculum already in place, and that can be implemented entirely if schools are not ready to make changes to their curriculum. The second option is to give schools authority to implement the emergency curriculum, which is a simplified version of the 2013 curriculum, which is what people are doing right now. And so my daughter finishes her homework in 10 minutes. It takes her 20 minutes to watch the lesson, 10 minutes to do the homework. That's 30 minutes instead of 6 hours in school. And the third option is to adopt entirely the Merdeka curriculum. So what about the Merdeka curriculum? Well, the structure itself is going to be much more flexible with yearly based school hour targets. Okay, I'm not exactly sure what the school hour targets are. There's no details here. Surprise, surprise. But I'm guessing, and just in guessing, underline guessing, or highlight guessing, or put guessing in air quotes, that they're going to require a certain amount of hours to be taught per year. As you know, Indonesia has 6 recognized religions. There are holidays here in Bali. We take holidays for all of them. And we have the long Balinese holidays, and then we've got the long Muslim holidays, and we have Christmas and Easter. We have Imlek, Buddha's birthday. So a lot of holidays here in Bali. Plus, times that teachers have meetings and other reasons for them not to have school, and so they're going to be hours. I hope they're enough. And the new curriculum will focus on essential learning materials that allow studying to be controlled in phases as opposed to on a yearly basis. That is unclear exactly what that means by phases instead of a yearly basis. The minister said this will give teachers flexibility to utilize various school equipment that fits students' characteristics. And students in high school, and here's some good news, will no longer be subjected to the specialization program. Therefore, they will be allowed to pick subjects that are compatible with their interests, talents, and aspirations. I worked in curriculum development in Indonesian schools. I didn't work with the 2013 curriculum. I was already retired before then. But the curriculum itself was, in some senses, compatible with the international school curriculum, which I helped develop when I was working in international school. The issue is materials and implementation, and teacher training and professional development. Those things need to be changed, not just the curriculum. There needs to be new training programs for teachers. There needs to be more professional development. There are so many changes in education that should be made, but that haven't been made yet because education is not a priority in Indonesia, unfortunately. And so that's the end of the main stories. Let's move on to what's happening with the virus in Jakarta right now. And what's happening in Jakarta with the rise in COVID cases. Jakarta sees rise in COVID-19 hospitalizations. Occupancy rates for hospital beds for COVID patients are rising rapidly in Jakarta, even though most of them are asymptomatic or mild patients. National COVID-19 Task Force spokesperson Pak Wiku, talked about him many times, announced on Tuesday the bed occupancy rate, the BOR, for coronavirus patients in 140 hospitals across the city has reached 66%, raising concerns over the possibility of an overwhelmed healthcare system. Glad my daughter is back in Bali. As of Monday, the nationwide BOR rate stood at 24.7%, so you can see the big difference there. Data from the health ministry also revealed that the intensive care unit bed occupancy rate is at 35%. The positivity rate for new cases in Jakarta is now at 22%. The WHO's minimum benchmark is 5%, so see where we are. And government officials urge the public to remain calm if they test positive for the virus and to check their symptoms. Those developing mild symptoms or who are asymptomatic should not go to the hospital, they said. Besides Jakarta, 3 other provinces recorded BORs for coronavirus patients higher than nationwide average. West Java at 32%, Banten at 39%, and Bali at 45%. But Health Minister Pak Budi said that hospitalizations still remain relatively under control despite the surge in infections, and that more than half of hospitalized patients nationwide are actually mild or asymptomatic cases. He said, and this is nice, a little self-criticism, if we were more efficient and only treated patients with moderate or severe symptoms, the hospitalization rate would be very low. According to epidemiologist Windu Purnomo from Airlangga University, he said that most of the asymptomatic patients who checked in to hospitals were high-income people who panicked after testing positive. He said they have money, so they go to the hospital despite suffering only mild symptoms or no symptoms at all. And he said authorities should not allow this to continue as it puts an unnecessary burden on hospitals and could increase health workers' exposure to COVID-19, which will increase their risk of contracting COVID-19. Yes, right, rich people, stay out of the damn hospitals if you're not sick. According to Pak Wiku, to help ease the burden on hospitals, the government has instructed hospitals to treat only COVID-19 patients with moderate to severe symptoms, and he said patients with mild or no symptoms can isolate at home or in isolation centers and use the free telemedicine services provided by the government. He added that the government has also asked regional administrations to convert more hospital beds for COVID-19 patients and to prepare more isolation centers, which, according to him, were pivotal in ensuring the patients with mild or no symptoms could still receive proper medical care and constant monitoring by health professionals. He added, we need to remember that even patients with mild symptoms can suffer from long-term health impacts if they do not receive proper medical assistance. Let's take a look at this story. Government suggests self-isolation for people in close contact with COVID positive. The government spokesperson for the handling of COVID-19 Resabroto Asmoro on Wednesday announced the latest public health guidelines for people who have come in contact with those who are confirmed to be COVID-19 positive. According to Asmoro, the first aspect is to go into self-isolation at home. You should test yourself 24 hours after the initial contact. There are options of PCR and antigen tests, which will depend on the criteria of your regions. And if you're taking them by yourself, there's a big price difference too. She continued, those undergoing the circumstance are urged to take another test 5 days after self-isolating and finish their self-quarantine if the second test clears a person from COVID-19. However, if the second test came back positive, that person must continue self-isolation. According to the Health Minister, Pak Budi, the circular number HK0201 Menkes 18-2022 that covers the prevention and control of COVID-19 cases says that people who have been exposed to Omicron and have mild symptoms and are asymptomatic can conduct a minimum 10-day self-isolation. What about the flight that came in last week from Japan, and how is that going? Flying from Japan, one Indonesian citizen positive for COVID-19 arrives in Bali. So there were 12 people on the flight, 6 Indonesians and 6 Japanese. And one of the Indonesians tested positive for COVID-19 on arrival and was immediately quarantined, according to the governor. Where is he being quarantined? I'm not sure, it doesn't say. The governor said that there were no more international flights scheduled after the flight from Japan until the flight from Singapore on the 16th with SIA. He said, well, we have a flight coming in with more than 70 passengers on the flight. That's going to be interesting to see how that works out. But he said, but the certainty in departure will see the development of this Omicron. Is there a possibility that it's going to be canceled by the government, by Singapore Air? Passengers going to back off? I don't know. We're just going to have to wait and see. How many times have I said that? There are a lot of people waiting to see what is going to happen with this flight. Even if you've taken your 2 times 24-hour PCR test and it's tested negative and you get on the plane, you arrive here, you can be positive. And so those are the risks you take with coming. And some good news for tourism in Southeast Asia. International bookings to Southeast Asia rising as borders open. Skyscanner. International passenger travel in the Asia-Pacific region was down 93% from pre-pandemic levels last year. And that left airlines heavily reliant on freight for revenue. And of course, the large Chinese tourism market is still closed. However, it says countries like Thailand, the Philippines, Vietnam, Indonesia, Singapore are emerging from an Omicron variant-related pause and reopening to vaccinated travelers, all with different programs, of course. Return economy fare bookings to those destinations from travelers in places like Britain, the US, and Germany rose by between 19% and 300% in January relative to December, according to Skyscanner. According to Skyscanner Senior Regional Director Asia Pacific Paul Whiteway, Skyscanner's global footprint, we've seen that when restrictions do ease, travelers react and are willing to adapt to new measures in order to be able to travel internationally again. He added, over the coming weeks, we'll see markets react to the news, airlines announcing new schedules and building capacity to allow the return of international travel at scale. And according to this, Australia said it would reopen its borders to international tourists from February 21st, leading to a 200% rise in bookings on the first day, according to Skyscanner, with the highest volume coming from the UK. So good news for tourism in Southeast Asia. I don't know that we're going to get that much here as long as we got the quarantine and the visa issues, and well, we're in the middle of the surge right now. And what's happening around Southeast Asia? Philippines welcome back foreign tourists for first time in 2 years, and so another country opening up and some more competition for the tourist bucks in Southeast Asia. The Philippines welcomed back more than 200 foreign tourists on Tuesday. We get 6, becoming the latest Southeast Asian nation to reopen the bid to revive a battered tourism sector after its borders shut to visitors nearly 2 years ago. According to a Malaysian social media influencer living in Australia, Sean James Stickney, I think it will be a good boost for tourism and the Filipino economy. And at the walled city of Intramuros in Manila, horse carriage drivers and bike rental operators were preparing for what they hoped would be a steady flow of vacationers to revive their income. Russell Lako, a bike rental manager, said half of our guests are foreigners who are on vacation here, so we're very happy to know that our country is finally open to foreign tourists. New cases in the Philippines have fallen from a September peak of 33,000 a day to just over 3,500 a day now. And about half of the country's 110 million people have now been fully vaccinated. So if you go there, you need to show proof of vaccination, but there is no quarantine. Yes, no quarantine. So you've got Thailand and you've got the Philippines you can travel to, and Malaysia is gonna open up, right? And we're open, but we've got the quarantine, and we're waiting to see what is going to happen on the 16th. Travel companies hope that the trickle of arrivals will turn into a flood to give the sector a lift. The Philippines had 8.26 million visitors in 2019, but that fell 82% in 2020 when the borders shut. And MotoGP, right? So MotoGP is coming up next month, and it is getting a lot of press, a lot of attention from the government. A lot of energy is being put into this. Mandalika MotoGP race to boost Indonesia's global brand. Erick Thohir. Erick Thohir is the state-owned enterprises minister. He said, our national branding is extremely important. He believes that investments will boost economic growth, but he insisted that tourism has to be positioned properly. He said the government is pushing for more international events for the sake of the national brand, such as the U23 World Cup in 2023, and international basketball event alongside the Philippines and Japan. And the minister stressed that it's crucial that the MotoGP be handled seriously because it is a continuous event that will go on in future years and has to be treated differently than international events that have been held in the past in Indonesia, such as the Asian Games. The government is looking for MotoGP to bring in some bucks. Is that going to happen? And what about jobs for locals? Well, that's the next segment. Lombok locals hold protest ahead of MotoGP Mandalika test. So a series of protests have taken place in Lombok over the past week ahead of the MotoGP preseason test event. There are at least 3 separate protests from groups of local residents who feel they've been left out of the development of the international circuit. And that was a big thing. You remember when they first started talking about this is going to boost the local economy. All the ministers that got involved in this all said the same thing. Yes, it is going to pump some money and jobs into the economy in Lombok. And Bali as well, because there'll be people staying in Bali and then going over to Lombok for the MotoGP. So what about these protests? One protest was held at a public street in front of the Mandalika Circuit Special Economic Area on Tuesday, this past Tuesday. Hundreds of youths joined in the central Lombok Karang Taruna, Indonesia, gathered to voice their dissatisfaction by burning tires. Okay, that's kind of serious. Burning tires. The last time I remember people burning tires here was when Megawati did not get the position as president and Bali went berserk. The protest was aimed at PT Indonesia Tourism Development Corporation, ITDC, and Mandalika Grand Prix Association, MGPA, which they have claimed, the protesters claimed, never involved local youth to work at the event. In another event, hundreds of local transportation drivers, youth, and a village head from the Pujut sub-district held a protest at the ITDC headquarters, demanding to be involved in the accommodation aspect of the international event. One representative of the protesters and village head, Katara Lalu Buntaran, said that the ITDC had duped local residents into believing they would be involved in its business activities that would help the local economy. And this past Monday, dozens of local transportation drivers who are members of the West Nusa Tenggara Transportation Entrepreneurs Association, APTA, APTA, I like that one, also held a demonstration in front of the airport, the Lombok airport. Expel ITDC and MGPA officials who did not involve local transportation drivers in central Lombok, said Lalu Reza in his speech in Praia on Monday. And responding to the protest, ITDC Managing Director Bram Subiandoro said demands for protests held by youth will be discussed to find a solution and to hear their aspirations. He added that the ITDC is willing to find the best solution for the matter, and he said, we will properly solve this issue. Please be patient and wait for a solution. Right? Sabar tunggu. Meanwhile, village head Qatar Lalu Buntaran echoed the same sentiment and said that local drivers will be met with the ITDC at the Central Lombok Police Sector on Wednesday. Both the ITDC and the MGPA have yet clarified what the local transportation drivers demand. You always want to get local people involved when you build something. It's good for community relations, and this was supposed to be part of the selling of this track being built over there. So follow up on this and see how that goes. More on MotoGP. Okay, there is a lot on MotoGP, and if you happen to live in Lombok and you want to make a comment on this, I'd love to hear, Peter, what your take on all of this is. MotoGP riders' selfies taken from quarantine bubble task force. So apparently the photos there at the start of this segment were taken by riders and their selfies, and apparently some people were upset thinking that they were traveling outside the bubble, so the government, in the form of COVID-19's task force health handling head Alexander Kaliaga Ginting, said, from what I know, they were in the quarantine bubble area, and they need to stay in that bubble apparently for 5 days. And the quarantine bubble zone aims to prevent interactions between Mandalika MotoGP riders with locals to avoid possible COVID-19 transmission. I'm not sure what the situation is over in Lombok. I have to find a government site for over there. According to Ginting, there are mobility restrictions on everyone in the travel bubble, meaning they can only stay in the specified quarantine zones based on the COVID-19 Task Force Circular Letter number 5 of 2022 on the health protocol for the Mandalika MotoGP bubble system during the COVID-19 pandemic. Wow, got that one out. Pak Ginting said the bubble system starts from the airport to the hotel, then the circuit to the hotel, and the riders are tested either with the antigen rapid or the PCR test every day. And what's happening here in Bali? Omicron soars, hotel occupancy rate in Bali drops again drastic. The arrival of domestic tourists during the Christmas New Year holiday reached 13,000, then it decreased by 10,000, and now after Omicron is surging, it's decreased again to around 7,000, according to the Deputy Chair of Environmental, Culture and Public Relations Division of the Regional Management Board of the Indonesian Hotel and Restaurants Association, PHRI, Gusti Nurai Surawijaya. Talked about him many times. Wow, these titles and names, a lot to be said here. The occupancy rate or hotel occupancy in Bali is currently around 15 to 20%. Before the surge in COVID-19 cases, hotel occupancy in Bali got as high as 30%. And according to Pak Surya Wijaya, he hopes that by the middle of March, things will have calmed down and hotel occupancy rates will rise again. He said, we expect it to rise in mid-March, but this depends on the development of the Omicron cases. If you follow any of the comments on here at all, you know that people in Australia are always talking about Jetstar canceling. Well, I made a booking and cancel, made a booking, cancel. Well, maybe this will provide some comic relief because apparently some people in our government don't realize how unreliable Jetstar has become. After Garuda, there are 2 airlines that will fly foreign tourists to Bali. Currently, there are a total of 3 airlines that will soon bring foreign tourists to Bali, namely Singapore Airlines, Jetstar Australia, and Garuda Indonesia, according to Pak Sandiaga Uno. Pak Sandiaga Uno said that the inaugural Garuda international flight from the Narita last week could encourage all airlines and have them fly directly to Bali soon. He said, always optimistic in efforts to restore Indonesian tourism, especially in Bali, which is currently ready to accept foreign tourists. Collaboration and synergy between tourism stakeholders and all relevant ministries, institutions, as well as the community can have a big impact on the process of Indonesia's economic recovery, one of which is through tourism. And so Jetstar, Are you going to be flying in soon? Does Pac San Diego Uno know something? And what about news from Buleleng? All RTH in Buleleng temporarily closed. What are RTH? Ruang Terbuka Hijau, green spaces. So the Buleleng Regency government, this time through the Buleleng Environmental Service, has again issued a policy to temporarily close green open spaces to avoid crowds of people. All green open spaces are closed for the general public and for other public activities. According to the Buleleng Regency government, this is for our safety so we are not exposed to the new variant of the COVID-19 virus, which is so massive in its spread. According to Katut Swarmawan, the coordinator for data and information of the Buleleng COVID-19 task force. I'll get all this out eventually. And what is closed is Singaraja City Park, Yowana Asri Park, Bung Karno Park, Ki Barak Panji Sakti Park, Sunda Kachil Park, and Regent's Office Park. Okay, and it looked to me like in the photo that's the harbor, so I'm not sure what they're calling that here. Usually it's called the Ex-Pelabuhan Buleleng. And according to Pakatut, all Buleleng people are invited to participate in supporting all policies issued by the government while still implementing health protocols and clean and healthy living behavior and carrying out daily activities. And that probably means those people that weren't wearing masks that I saw out in the street today. So not good news for people who want to go out to the public parks in Buleleng. They're closed until further notice, just like these schools. And so those hordes of wandering kids who have nothing to do all day, they can just hang out in the city streets or hang around the kampung or the banjar or the desa. And some more news from Buleleng. 8 Bali tourism officials fired for fraud. Now this happened a while ago, and I don't think when it came out I reported on it because I wanted to see what was going to happen. Well, here are the results. So the 8 now former tourism officials were found guilty of misusing 738 million rupiahs in central government grants intended to relieve Buleleng's tourism sector businesses suffering due to the continuing pandemic. What a bunch of good-hearted government officials. Well, ex-government officials now. The decision to end the group's employment as government workers was taken by a special team charged with personnel matters in the Buleleng Regency after the criminal court's decision was finally declared final. Gede Wisnawa of the Buleleng Regency announced the firing of the 8 this past Monday. The firing was formalized via a letter signed by the Regent of Buleleng and sent to the families of the 8 officials who are sitting in prison. The prison sentences for the 8 former officials relatively light. The former head of tourism for Buleleng was sentenced to 2 years and 8 months and fined 50 million rupiahs in order to pay damages of 7,989,416 rupiahs, and failure to pay these amounts will add 1 year and 4 months to the current sentence. The secretary to the Buleleng Tourism Office was sentenced to 1 year in prison and fined 50 million rupiahs, and it is the same for the rest of these. So the assistants to the chief all got basically 1 year and 50 million rupiahs in fines. And that included the head of the Agency of Tourism Standardization Division of the Buleleng Tourism Office, the head of Public Guidance Division of the Buleleng Office, the head of Promotions, the head of Development and Manpower, the head of Marketing Division, the head of Human Resources. These were the top officials here, and yeah, they're siphoning off money. The 1 year sentence handed down to the 7 subordinate officials were less than the 2 to 3 years in prison sought by state prosecutors. A failure to pay the 50 million rupiah fine by any of the 7 will add 4 months to their prison sentence. And the written declarations of dishonorable discharge from the civil service take effect February 1st and end any salary, allowances, or pension facilities for the 8. However, the 8 will receive the benefits of an old age pension based on their record of payment into the applicable system, and they can appeal this decision. And some people have no heart. People are struggling here, and they're just gonna take the money. Time for an update and wrap up. There's not much on updates. Except this is an interesting one. Sri Lanka resumes on-arrival visas for tourists except for a few countries. So here's another country opening up with no quarantine and just get a visa when you show up. 10 countries are excluded from this. Those being Afghanistan, Pakistan, Syria, Nigeria, Ghana, Ivory Coast, Cameroon, Myanmar, Nepal, and North Korea. So if you want to go to Sri Lanka, which is a lovely place, I would like to go back there. Okay, and no other updates. Well, yeah, kind of one. Australian viewers, I'm sure you're going to let me know. I just heard that Jetstar and Virgin canceled more flights because of a lack of interest. And, well, I'm not surprised. A lot of people are not going to want to go with the quarantine, and they're not going to want to pay the money for the visa, and they're not going to want to wander around while there's a pandemic. I mean, there's a number of different reasons for people not to come to Bali right now and go somewhere else. I agree. As I've said before, I wouldn't come right now myself. And no real wrap up. Everything has been wrapped up. It's pretty straightforward. We've got the virus. It's spreading. It's a surge. The government says not to worry. Hospitalizations are up. A lot of those people are asymptomatic or with mild symptoms. Deaths are up, but according to a number of epidemiologists, it's because of comorbidities. We still could use some tourists here to get things going, but I don't see the government policy right now as helping that much. It's better than what it was, but compared to other countries now that are available for your dollars, and you might be better off going to Thailand or the Philippines. If you found this video helpful, amusing, interesting, informative, not irritating, please give it a thumbs up. And if you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. I do this twice a week. If you're new here, Wednesdays and Sundays. And on Sundays also, there is a cooking video. And that's it. Thanks for viewing. Stay safe. Be kind to someone today. And I will see you on Wednesday.